This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. Some of the people opposed to President Reagan's new arms deal with the Soviets today fired back in the pre-summit clashing, going beyond criticism to name-calling. And the thunder isn't only coming from the Republican radical right. Senate Republican leader and presidential candidate Robert Dole reported he gave Mr. Reagan what for to his face today for publicly branding all treaty opponents as know-nothings who believe war with the Soviets is inevitable. Bill Plant reports on the gathering storm before the summit.
Angry conservatives turned on President Reagan as right-wing anxiety over the summit and arms agreement exploded into open, bitter warfare today. Outraged by the president's characterization of treaty opponents as ignorant in yesterday's television interview, some former supporters charged Mr. Reagan has completely given up his principles.
Unfortunately, Ronald Reagan is a very weak man with a strong wife and a strong staff. He's become a useful idiot for Kremlin propaganda.
They can't find the words to express their anger that this man who asked to lead us has abandoned almost every position he's ever held.
But anybody who thinks that Ronald Reagan is betraying his legacy or being betrayed is flat wrong. If you want to let Reagan be Reagan, you got a prime example of it right now with this effort to negotiate this treaty.
It is profoundly ironic for Ronald Reagan to be defending himself against charges that he is soft on the Soviets. He came to the White House 7 years ago with a deep suspicion of arms control, a plan for an enormous military buildup, and sharply anti-Soviet sentiments. Consider this from his first presidential news conference.
The only morality they recognize is what will further their cause, meaning they reserve unto themselves the right to commit any crime, to lie, to cheat.
What's happened? How's he changed?
He hadn't changed. What has happened is the same thing that happens with the old story about hitting the mule across the nose with the 2x4. You got to get their attention. That's the difference. We would not have this treaty in prospect had Ronald Reagan not been the toughest man in the valley.
He may be tough, but things certainly aren't what they used to be. In little more than a year, Mr. Reagan has gone from the zenith of his popularity and power through a long nightmare of failure and defeat. Republicans lost control of the Senate. The Iran-Contra scandal almost immobilized the administration. One Supreme Court nominee was defeated, another withdrew. The stock market crashed. He had prostate surgery, Mrs. Reagan had cancer surgery. And most of his oldest, closest advisors left the administration. Enter Mikhail Gorbachev. Mr. Reagan sees this summit and the arms treaty as chances to rescue his presidency, restore his effectiveness, and bring more to his final 13 months than a series of staged photo opportunities, grip and grin. The Reagan legacy is at stake, a legacy about which Mrs. Reagan cares deeply. Some critics fear that this concern is driving the process.
See, we've got to stop thinking about just what's good for Ronald Reagan and think what's good for the United States. We've got to think first about what the country needs in international affairs and these weapons, and not how the president is going to get his reputation back.
In fact, Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev do need this summit for themselves as well as for their nations, but for entirely different reasons. The General Secretary seeks to consolidate his leadership for the remainder of a lifetime. The president's leadership will soon end, and he seeks a place in history.
There's an enormous contrast in the sense that one man is near the end of his political career, and the other hopes to be at the beginning of his career as a national leader. Gorbachev, I think, is looking ahead to the year 2000. He hopes to be standing on Lenin's mausoleum, opening in the new century, him at 69, younger than Reagan is now, and have people whisper, Mikhail the Great.
So each man comes to the summit sure of what he wants, but facing bitter opposition. Each must hope history will prove he was right. Bill Plant, CBS News, the White House.
All of the Republican in-house warfare probably won't be helped by what's in former White House aide Michael Deaver's forthcoming book. Excerpts are in the Washington Times today. The longtime close friend of President and Nancy Reagan writes that the First Lady often, quote, lobbied the president to soften his line on the Soviets, to reduce military spending and not to push Star Wars at the expense of the poor and dispossessed, unquote. About Ronald Reagan, Deaver writes, quote, I had never known anyone so unable to deal with close personal conflict. Deaver is currently on trial for perjury in connection with his lobbying business. The summit comes at the most critical point of Gorbachev's 2.5 years in power. His master plan of perestroika, restructuring the Soviet economy, has made little headway and is now facing sharp questions, not just from political opponents, but from the Soviet public as well. Wyatt Andrews reports.
Consider Mikhail Gorbachev and the Big River mink farm in Siberia. This is not Gorbachev's farm, it is his problem. On Big River this year, they fulfilled the plan and more. 5,000 extra mink pelts for sale directly to the West because perestroika, Gorbachev's restructuring, allows that now. Mink is a premium export. A deal with the West meant a pay raise for the workers, more equipment, new investment, but it never happened because no one knew what to do.
I'm just not sure about this idea of going straight to the market.
This is why Gorbachev has his hands full. He is teaching self-reliance to a people who never sought it, and that makes perestroika elusive. It is also why Gorbachev is coming to America. He needs arms control with the West to give perestroika time at home. What you are watching here is Soviet TV, a program called Spotlight on Perestroika, a kind of televised act of contrition. The Soviet way of explaining perestroika by humiliating the bureaucrats who aren't changing fast enough. One night, the city fathers of Vladivostok are caught mishandling city housing.
It's all here. It's all here in the contract you signed.
Trial by television, always a bad guy and always a victim.
But there is plenty of hot water. Unfortunately, it's all in the cellar.
The broadcast harps on inbred laziness, irresponsibility, alcohol.
Thank you, Mikhail Gorbachev, for banning the sale of vodka. Now our husbands stay home and they love us again.
In this extraordinary sequence, a Leningrad factory manager screams at his workers. State inspectors will reject your work, he warns them, and your wages will suffer. In another factory, inspectors did reject this heap of small electric pumps, and workers here too are incensed. The very idea that they must earn the paycheck that they once took for granted comes hard after years of taking it easy.
You inspectors just sit on your butts. We have to suffer because of our people's bad work.
Gorbachev's perestroika is a theory in search of specifics. There are broad principles, better pay for better work, an end to subsidized food, and the demand that factories make a profit. But it's still as if Mikhail Gorbachev had declared, let there be perestroika, and left it to his subjects to figure out what it means. While Gorbachev is in America, his people will be where they've always been, in line to buy the products of a backward state. Gorbachev cannot achieve his wish for them at home and win an arms race. Next Tuesday, he signs a treaty, but what he wants from America is a truce. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Moscow.
Soviet television today trumpeted the startup of Unit Number 3 at the Chernobyl complex, site of the world's worst nuclear reactor blowout, April 1986, at the run-amok Unit Number 4, right next door. Today's Soviet pictures of a Chernobyl unit back online with a fresh coat of paint came the same day a Soviet official admitted 36 more accidents at Chernobyl in recent months, some of them fatal. At least one accident involved mishandling of radioactive reactor fuel rods. In Atlanta today, freedom for the 89 hostages held for 11 days by rioting Cuban inmates. And the Cubans came out too under special terms of an 8-point agreement they negotiated. Bill Whitaker reports on a peaceful ending to a terrifying takeover and some of the lessons that may have been learned.
Cuban inmates at the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary surrendered to authorities today. They were loaded onto buses and transported to other federal prisons around the country.
Step number one will be to process all of those who come out voluntarily. If there are any holdouts, then they will simply be taken into custody when the FBI moves in tomorrow to secure the facility.
Early this morning, the 89 hostages held by the inmates were released to families and friends.
Look here. Yeah.
Today, they recalled their ordeal.
I went through all the stages of a hostage situation. You're fear, your anger, your depression, your despair, and your revenge.
The country's longest and largest federal prison uprising ended only after the U.S. agreed to many of the Cubans' demands. Their cases will be reviewed individually, but they got no outright ban on deportations, their #1 priority.
What did happen was consistent with our policy and our plan, and that was to exert extreme patience.
I don't think that the lesson here is that violence pays. The most prudent thing to do is to talk your way out and do what you have to do in order to win a peaceful resolution.
Tonight, some members of Congress are calling for a federal investigation of the Cuban inmate riots in Atlanta and Oakdale, Louisiana. And Senator Shelby of Alabama is calling for the resignation of Attorney General Edwin Meese for his handling of the crises. But for the hostages and their families in Atlanta, the political fallout doesn't mean much. What matters is that their nightmare is over. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Atlanta.
And still to come on the Friday CBS Evening News. Ray Brady on why a lot of Christmas shoppers can't get waited on. David Martin on the top gun skis of the Soviet Air Force. And Leslie Stahl with a pre-summit snapshot of Washington.
If you thought you had to give up comfort to get a close shave, Norelco says, think again. Their revolutionary shaving system shaves skin close in a way that's incredibly comfortable. As the hair enters the chamber, the patented lift and cut system lifts each hair and holds it a split second before a blade cuts it. So it's possible to shave skin close without the blades even touching the skin. Norelco Rotitract, where close and comfortable come face to face. This Stetson pre-shave can be yours free with selected Norelco razors. This Pontiac Trans Am could be yours, with a little luck. Enter Norelco's Quest for the Gold sweepstakes. Look for details wherever Norelco razors are sold.
My grandma's the best. But what do you get a grandma for her birthday?
Introducing the American Express Gift Check. It lets the people you love choose a present they love. The new American Express Gift Check.
It's from my grandson.
It's been a long day, big boy. Feel like you still got something left? Sure you do. 'Cause you got one smart mama, and she got you off the ground this morning with a real winner. Howdy ho, wheat, time to gloat. 'Cause you don't wear no sugar coat. You just can't beat that pure whole wheat. Now go tell your mama what the big boys eat.
There's a paradox in the government's latest report on unemployment. The Labor Department today said that in spite of the stock market crash, the nation's civilian jobless rate fell to 5.9% for the month of November. It has not been any lower since July 1979 under President Carter. And now some businesses can't find workers, and some workers can't find jobs. Business correspondent Ray Brady explains.
Christmas shopping time again, but the stores are crowded. They're hot. And just try to get a salesperson to help you.
You have to spend twice as much time looking for it yourself.
It's almost impossible to get somebody to find something for you if it's not out.
The teenagers and housewives who used to work in stores at Christmas just aren't around. Like many employers, stores are finding a shocking shortage, not enough people to fill the jobs.
We just want people to work. We're very, very desperate for people to work.
They're looking for people nearly everywhere. If you're building in Washington, avoid bricks. There's a shortage of bricklayers. In Indiana, a supermarket hired 71-year-old Jim Nicholas because there aren't enough young people. And in Portland, the Maine Medical Center can't fill hundreds of jobs, and it's looking for nurses in Ireland.
There are 18 patients that could be served in this hospital right now that we can't serve because we don't have sufficient staff.
Partly that's caused by the baby bust. The falling birth rate is putting fewer people into the workforce, just as new jobs are being created.
It was particularly rough last summer. We had many restaurants that had to close down, hotels that had to close half their facility because they didn't have enough staff.
Another problem. Those who need jobs often can't handle them. 500,000 kids a year drop out of school, and another 700,000 who do graduate can barely read or write.
Very, very few jobs are being created for people without certain basic skills.
Hardee's is holding pep rallies to keep the workers it does have. And retailers already are raising wages to get Christmas help. Economists predict the people shortage could mean other workers will find their pay going up as well. Ray Brady, CBS News, New York.
More casualties of Black Monday on Wall Street today. The investment firm of Kidder Peabody said it will lay off 1,000 people and cut expenses by 20% in an effort to save $100 million annually. In addition to the crash, Kidder Peabody was hurt by being involved in the insider trader scandals.
Anybody who really cares about Christmas
Snacks, sir?
Just some milk. And the cookies.
will be at America's biggest Christmas sale at Sears. A sale so big it starts Friday night at 6. So big everything at Sears is on sale. All 10 to 50% off. All toys, all apparel, all furniture, all tools, all appliances and electronics. All of which makes the trip well worth it.
Would you like those gift wrapped?
I think I can handle that.
America's biggest Christmas sale starts Friday night at 6.
It's Red Lobster's new Seafood Trios.
1, 2, 3 seafood favorites on one dish, 3 different tastes, each one delicious.
7 all-new Seafood Trios starting at $6.95.
Lobster leads our supreme trio, followed by fried shrimp from the sea. Oh my, those scallops make this platter sure to please. At Red Lobster, good things come in threes.
And treat your kids to their own child's trio, just $1.95.
Today, hospitals have more medicines than ever to care for their patients. The one they choose most to relieve pain is Tylenol. Look, last year they dispensed Tylenol 10 times more than the leading aspirin and ibuprofen brands combined. With so many pain relievers to choose from, isn't it reassuring to know the pain reliever hospitals use most is Tylenol? That's a good reason for you and your family to use Tylenol too. Tylenol, the pain reliever hospitals use most.
In Haiti, leaders of the Roman Catholic Church told the military government they will not comply with a request to nominate members for a new electoral council. The government has been charged with aiding and abetting the massacres that wrecked last Sunday's election. The U.S. State Department said today it will pull out about 150 Americans from Haiti, 2/3 of the U.S. Embassy staff, because of the volatile situation. The nuclear arms talks coming up next week at the summit are also throwing a new spotlight on U.S. and Soviet conventional arms. These are the Russians' huge ground, sea, and air forces that will loom even larger, especially those aimed against Western Europe, when nuclear arsenals are reduced. CBS News Pentagon correspondent David Martin has gotten a first-hand look at this backbone of Soviet military strength. In Part 3 of his special report, Inside the Red Army, Martin looks at Soviet air power.
Kubinka Aerodrome outside Moscow, a Soviet air base American journalists have never seen before. We're kept to a corner of the base, but in the distance we can see more aircraft. This is a MiG-23, not the top of the line, but the Soviet Air Force has more of these than any other jet fighter. Along with hundreds of other aircraft, including helicopters, they could determine who controls the battlefield over Europe.
The weather here is terrible, low cloud cover with snow flurries, but it is exactly the kind of weather Soviet pilots would have to contend with in the air over Central Europe.
Unlike the conscript soldiers of the Red Army, the men of the Soviet Air Force are mostly professionals, men who make a career of military service. Soviet pilots look and sound remarkably like American fighter pilots, sure of themselves and of their mission, which Major Vladimir Bashanov explains in terms anyone can understand.
Well, I have 2 kids, 2 boys, 3 and 11. When I watch them running around the yard playing, I think my mission in life is to allow them to run. So I would never see them crying because there is some threat hanging over them. And for that, I would give my life. If it happens, I'll do that.
Like American pilots, Soviet pilots swear the planes they fly are the best, even the older MiG-21, which is outmoded by Western standards.
You know, a MiG-21 is the favorite Russian jet, and it's a pleasure to fly it. And I think it's not gotten out of date. You get up in the air and you feel that it has very big potential.
Like the rest of the Soviet military, the Air Force is ahead of the U.S. in numbers, but still playing catch-up in quality. The electronics in this control tower belong in a museum. Undoubtedly, the Soviets have better than this. The combat record of Soviet aircraft is not an impressive one. Soviet-made aircraft flown by Syrian and Libyan pilots have been badly beaten by U.S. aircraft flown by Israeli and American pilots. When we brought that up, the pilots dodged the question, and a Soviet political officer who was monitoring the interview became visibly annoyed and tried to end the interview. Soviet fighter pilots have no combat experience. There's a war going on in Afghanistan, but the other side doesn't have an air force. Soviet helicopter pilots, however, are heavily engaged in combat in Afghanistan.
This is the Hind helicopter, a flying arsenal of weapons designed to decimate troops on the ground. But the Soviets are finding out the hard way in Afghanistan. It makes a juicy target for anyone armed with a heat-seeking missile or just a rifle.
Captain Konstantin Vyasajev has flown the Hind in Afghanistan.
The guerrillas, they bought so many weapons that it's very hard to fly. We have to do different tricks to avoid all kinds of fire against the helicopters. But as you see, I am here.
In a battle for Europe, the Hind would be used against U.S. troops, but it would be a sitting duck for American jet fighters. It would be up to Soviet fighter pilots to keep the American jets away, although they insist the last thing they want is to do battle with U.S. pilots.
We don't get those images that the American is the enemy. We don't have those emotions that there he is, the aggressor, and we have to kill him. But of course, if it comes to my children, my family, my country, then I won't hold back.
In the end, an air battle in which the Soviets had the advantage in numbers and the Americans had the edge in technology would, as one of the Soviet pilots told us, probably be decided by the skill of the men in the cockpits. The men who fly these Soviet planes may sound peaceful enough, but make no mistake, they are professionals whose business is war. David Martin, CBS News at the Kubinka Aerodrome in the Soviet Union.
The Prime Minister of Cambodia and former ruler Prince Sihanouk declared today that their peace conference in France was a success. They said they would meet again next month, and they called for all factions in Cambodia to join them in settling the 9-year-old guerrilla war. Sihanouk is the nominal leader of a coalition fighting against about 140,000 Soviet-armed Vietnamese troops who support the current Cambodian government. 11 American tourists on safari in Africa were killed today when a small charter plane crashed in Rwanda.
Fireman's Fund Insurance, underwriter of movies and television, construction projects, property. The stakes are high.
Every time you go into business, there's risk.
Our business is learning to understand and handle that risk.
We needed a partner to help us through that, and we found it in IBM. We got IBM together with our business people and captured the way our experts arrive at decisions, and that's what goes into the computer. Doing business with IBM minimizes our risk. IBM is our insurance policy.
With most rechargeable lights, you need an extra hand to shine them where you want. So First Alert created Ready Light, the rechargeable light with a swivel head. Ready Light from First Alert, always ready to lend a hand.
Finally, there's an extra-strength antacid that doesn't taste chalky. Introducing extra-strength Maalox Whip. Extra-strength relief and smooth, creamy taste. New extra-strength Maalox Whip. Extra-strength whipped in, chalky taste wiped out.
Because nightlife doesn't have to mean leaving home, Kmart presents our 30% off robes and gown sale. Ladies' robes and gowns and men's robes. The coziest solids, the softest pastels. At 30% off, they're sure to make every night a good one. But hurry, because no matter how you spend your nights, the Kmart 30% off robes and gown sale only lasts a few days.
On this weekend before the summit, CBS News national affairs correspondent Leslie Stahl reports from our nation's capital on Waiting for Gorbachev, a transformation making what's in and around the Capitol Beltway look more like the Borscht Belt.
Summertime, and the right wing is queasy.
And they have every reason to be. Russian is in. These Bolshevik t-shirts at $12 to $40 are selling like hot blinis.
A lot of people come in and buy them because of this Gorbachev summit, and also because it's like a new fashion.
In this glitzy sphere of influence, it's no surprise that everybody who's anybody is pulling every string in town to get to dine with the Gorbachevs.
They call up and say, my invitation must have been lost in the mail.
Summit time, and the glasnost is flowing.
But the Soviets have thrown in one of their usual last-minute monkey wrenches, refusing to wear black tie to the Reagan's black tie state dinner.
We don't have it. We don't have this kind of protocol in our proletarian society.
But what about when in Rome?
And you invite us to go your bourgeois ways.
And another cauldron of controversy. The White House has called in a French chef for the big dinner. This did not impress Buddy of Buddy's Inn, who thinks Gorbachev deserves better.
I think that if he's here, he should have American food.
Chef Jackie Veal says she's available.
Sure. Yeah. Down home cooking.
And no French sauce.
Nah, too fattening.
When John Paul came to Washington, they called it Pope Mania. Prince Charles and Lady Di took over this town. But the Gorbachevs don't have that kind of celebrity. This could be the low-key summit.
No one's talking about
Nobody talking about the summit.
But the Russians are here. You can spot herds of them roaming the streets, even making an occasional purchase.
This I bought, it's my best shopping in America.
A block from the White House, they're spending $5 for a picture so they can tell their friends Gorbachev wasn't the only one to meet the Reagans. Leslie Stahl, CBS News, Washington.
It's nice here. One more, bigger one.
And that's the CBS Evening News. Bob Schieffer will be here tomorrow. I'll be reporting Monday from Washington as we begin our summit coverage. Until then, Dan Rather, have a good weekend.
It's the Subaru year-end clearance! The greatest Subaru deals in Subaru history! Stupendous Subaru savings!
Hold it! Instead of a great deal of hype, Subaru gives you a great deal. Up to $1,500 factory cash back or 3.9% financing.
Enough! You won't be seeing this commercial much longer. Up to $1,500 back or 3.9 will be gone. Subaru's last blast. It's about to self-destruct.
The new Remington Microscreen Ultimate with the exclusive beard lifter stretches the skin and lifts whiskers other shavers leave behind. The new Remington Microscreen Ultimate shaves as close as a blade and closer than any other electric shaver or your money back. New Total Oatmeal.
I'll stick with old-fashioned Quaker Oats.
100% of the daily allowance of 9 vitamins.
Been getting that.
No, you haven't. 100% of iron.
Been getting that.
No, you haven't.
Total Oatmeal, the vitamin nutrition you thought you were getting all along.
No, you haven't.
When your coffee's smooth and easy, like Sunday morning, and it tastes your way.
It's necessarily Nescafe, great coffee blends to taste your way. That's necessarily Nescafe.
This is CBS.
Coming up on Eyewitness